TIFU by ignoring my vegan host. Edit. Vegetarian. Not vegan. My friend and I, both freshly 18 years old, had saved up for a few years to travel the world. We started with Canada, where we first stayed with my friend's cousins. To save on costs early on in the trip, one of the first things we were told by the wife, let's call her Linda, as she was driving us from the airport to her home, was that her husband was a hardcore vegan and we mustn't bring up the subject and must definitely not ever eat or bring meat in the house, as it upsets him. Easy. No meat. How many meals need meat anyway? And we're only staying here for a month. My friend and I were both into fitness and got into a good exercise regime during our first weeks in Canada. Walking, running, calisthenics, etc., which made us, naturally, very hungry. We were both also very aware that exercise is extremely benefited by a high amount of protein. And the only meals we had been eating mainly consisted of pasta, cheese and potatoes. So we were feeling a little malnutritioned and felt our hard work was going to waste somewhat. One morning, our hosts told us they would be out for the whole day, which at first wouldn't make a difference to our day as we would likely be exploring the local area some more anyway. That afternoon my friend and I were on a stroll when I had the brilliant idea of, instead of having the usual cheesy pasta tonight, why not reward our bodies with some source of protein? The hosts were out so they would never suspect a thing anyway. And I am sure even if they did, it wouldn't be an issue as there would be no trace of meat anywhere. My friend agreed and we went into the nearest supermarket and bought a few tins of tuna to go into the cheesy pasta. We got back to the house and I made the meal, which really hit the spot and filled the gap we felt had been missing in our diet for the past couple of weeks. We washed up and went to chill around the house. Our hosts returned from their day out. My friend and I are sitting in the same dimmed room, relaxing, when all I see is a shadow in the doorway. Have you been consuming dead animal in my home? A stern voice said. How could he know? In made sure to clean everything meticulously. I panicked and my first instinct was to lie. No, I say calmly, starting to notice my heartbeat thumping in my ears. Then why does my home smell like corpses? I broke and said I added some tuna to our meal. He shook his head and stormed upstairs. I'd like to remind you at this point that we were two young, well-meaning lads trying to make a good impression on the world, who had undervalued some earlier advice. And this confrontation hit us harder than it would have now. My friend and I looked at each other shocked, not knowing what to do now. The husband wasn't the most approachable man at the best of times. Less so when we've just broken his number one house rule. After about an hour of contemplating, we went upstairs and nervously knocked on his bedroom door. My friend explained the situation for us, which at the time I thought was fair, as it's his family, despite him not knowing them that well. But now I know it should have been me, as it was my idea. The husband stayed pretty quiet, but his wife was also in the room, comforting him. We went to bed that night not knowing if we were to leave the next morning despite having not booked anywhere to stay for another 2 weeks. The next morning my friend and I were greeting with a piece of A4 paper that had been slid under our bedroom door. Confused, we went over to pick it up. It was a full-page letter from our host, in detail explaining the rules of staying at people's houses, how you should act and that your presence should be a gift in return for staying there, and that you should always, whether you agree with them or not, follow the rules of that household. At first we were relieved to see there was no mention of us having to leave. And of course, these are all wise words and I did eventually take them on, despite feeling somewhat rebellious at the time towards such an authority other than my parents. We continued our travels for 8 months and came back to our home country of Scotland, more mature for it. The end. TL. D are my friend and I ate meat at our vegan host's house while traveling and were confronted and nearly kicked out. Ah, canned tuna, the least fragrant of meats. They'll never suspect a thing. If you wanted to have a meal with meat, why didn't you just go to a restaurant? As a vegetarian for over 20 years, I'm giggling that tuna was what you went with. You could have likely gotten away with meat sandwiches, but anything you had to cook would have a pretty distinct smell. But cooked tuna? Tears of joy, tears of joy. Hardcore vegans wouldn't be eating cheese. Cheese is made from milk of animals and avoiding animal products is like vegans' whole game. We all screw up sometimes. The important thing is that you learned from it. Canada doesn't have beans or vegetables. Couldn't you have, I don't know, eaten meat outside their home? If you were feeling that malnourished, maybe go to a park with a barbecue? Freshly 18 years old is probably why y'all didn't get kicked out. Glad about returning to home country more mature after your travels. Nothing like it. House rules are rules. Just because it's dietary does not make the house owners terrible. Imagine bringing a live chicken and cutting into pieces at a meat-eating person's house. Nope. That wouldn't sell either. Some commenters are verified more feud than your teenage immature self. You are lucky they did not throw out anything you used to cook the meat and then ask you to pay for it. I lived with vegetarians for quite a while and would never have dreamed of using their cooking utensils for my meat as they would have considered it ruin. I eat meat, but you have to respect the house owners and their beliefs. You were wrong to eat meat in the house, but it looks like you understand. Lol, this absolutely happened in Vancouver, didn't it? All I'm taking away from this is you put canned tuna in cheesy pasta. Not usually one to yuck someone's yum, but WTF. I am sure the guy was mourning the murder of said tuna. How hard is it to just follow the rules in other people's houses? I think that was a bit of a daft thing to do and you should really have eaten out instead. However, there was no need to treat you like you cooked their family pet. Why didn't you just have some beans or lentils or something if you wanted protein? Glad you were able to stay. If you go again, just make sure to eat out, that way you can get the protein your body needs. Just go grab some meat at a restaurant. My friend and I were both into fitness and got into a good exercise regime during our first weeks in Canada. Walking, running, calisthenics, etc., which made us, naturally, very hungry. We were both also very aware that exercise is extremely benefited by a high amount of protein. And the only meals we had been eating mainly consisted of pasta, cheese and potatoes. So we were feeling a little malnutritioned and felt our hard work was going to waste. Somewhat. No, not really. Protein is vastly oversold in the sports community for decades for the benefit of mostly dairy industry selling what used to be a garbage product. That was thrown down the drain after cheese production. High-end bodybuilders seeking sponsorship willingly accepted this as they obviously couldn't market steroids in retail shops, which is what really made them big. Aside natural genetics, most of the protein Western man consumes just get peed out. They don't need it. It's more than likely the gut bacteria you cultivated over a lifetime made you want to go back to your old foods. Those don't change overnight and they can signal the brain so they don't die off. Diet determines gut bacteria type in what is known as the gut-brain axis. Your exercise was likely not impacted, nor was there any malnutrition, and probably less on a vegan diet, unless made of a high amount of processed foods. https www.reddit.com/r/sicko/comments/x0hb3c/ can we talk about daily protein targets /im9pwb9/ https www.drmcdougall.com/misc/2003nl/dec/031200 proteinfa.htm https www.drmcdougall.com/misc/2007nl/april/protein.htm. You could not have chosen a stinker. Meat should have just got a takeaway.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.